I just want to show you. Come here, Cain. Look. Look.
Susan's life felt like a puzzle with a jagged, missing piece until she met Cain, an orphan Cain Corso. They said he was a monster, but what he did on his very first night left the family speechless. The shelter was a cold, echoing labyrinth of broken spirits and desperate whimpers when Susan first walked in, her heart heavy with a void that no medicine could heal. When she asked for a giant breed, the worker didn't lead her to a massive beast, but to a tiny, shivering pile of tiger-striped fur named Cain. The worker's voice trembled as he explained that Cain was the last of his kind. His father had vanished into the shadows of the streets, and his mother, along with all his siblings, had perished during a brutal, soul-shattering birth. Cain was a miracle of survival, a tiny warrior who had faced death before he even opened his eyes. The moment Susan gathered the fragile creature into her arms, she felt a surge of electricity, a profound realization that this little soul was the missing fragment of her existence. Cain didn't struggle or cry. He simply tucked his head into the crook of her neck, breathing in her scent as if he had finally found the anchor to his drifting soul. They signed the papers with tears blurring the ink, officially bringing home the heir to a legendary lineage of protectors. But the transition wasn't what anyone expected. As soon as they stepped inside, the tiny Cain didn't growl or hide. He clumsily climbed onto the softest velvet sofa and rolled onto his back, exposing his vulnerable belly in a display of total, absolute trust that brought Susan to her knees. If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, I have to say I'm a little heartbroken. Stories like this need your support. Hit that subscribe button right now. You won't regret it. Now, back to what happened next as the weeks turned into a whirlwind of growth and surprises. Susan would spend hours watching him sleep, his paws twitching as he dreamed of a world where he was no longer alone, while his body began to expand with the unstoppable force of his genetic destiny. He wasn't just a dog, he was a living promise of loyalty, a creature that had traded his traumatic past for the warmth of a family that saw him not as a weapon, but as a son. The house no longer felt hollow. It vibrated with the heavy, rhythmic heartbeat of a guardian who was growing more powerful with every sunset, preparing for a future no one could yet imagine. Years began to bleed into one another, and the tiny orphan transformed into a 200-pound mountain of rippling muscle and obsidian fur, a physical manifestation of raw power that stopped traffic whenever they walked down the street. However, inside the four walls of their home, the fearsome Cain Corso seems to have forgotten he was a predator. The most hilarious and baffling sight was the daily war between Cain and the family's tiny house cat. Susan would often find herself paralyzed with laughter as she watched the massive 200-pound beast sprinting through the hallways, his heavy paws thundering like a stampede of elephants, all because a 3-pound kitten had hissed at him. Cain would dive behind the curtains, his giant head peeking out with eyes wide with playful terror, whimpering for Susan to save him from the ferocious feline. "Huddy Ama, you are a legendary Cain Corso," Susan would shout through her tears of joy, but Cain would only respond by wagging his tail so violently that it sounded like a whip cracking against the walls, nearly knocking over the furniture in his excitement. He became Dennis's living mattress, a warm, breathing fortress that the boy would curl up against every night. Gary would wrestle with him on the floor, their laughter mingling with Cain's deep, guttural grunts of happiness. Yet, despite his goofy nature, there was a strange, haunting quality to his gaze. Sometimes Susan would catch Cain standing perfectly still by the window, his massive body frozen like a marble statue, his eyes scanning the horizon with a cold, analytical intensity that felt ancient. It was as if a switch would flip, and for a split second, the Kuchak Kapei would vanish, replaced by the ghost of a Roman war dog.
But then, as soon as Susan called his name, he would melt back into a puddle of wagging energy, rushing to drop his heavy head into her lap, demanding the same gentle strokes she had given him when he was a shivering orphan. The contrast was staggering, a creature that could crush bone, choosing instead to be the softest presence in their lives, a silent sentinel who seems to be holding back a storm of protective fire just to keep the peace of his sanctuary intact.
The mystery of Cain's missing edge finally led Susan to a renowned veterinarian, a man who had seen thousands of powerful breeds and understood the primal secrets of the Cain Corso. As Cain sat in the exam room, his massive 200-pound frame taking up nearly all the floor space, he gently licked the doctor's hand, his tail thumping a slow, rhythmic beat against the metal cabinets. Susan expressed her concern, wondering if his traumatic past or his pampered life had erased the protective fire that his breed was famous for. The vet stayed silent for a long moment, looking deep into Cain's dark, soulful eyes, before turning to Susan with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He leaned in and whispered, "Don't let the act fool you. He isn't soft. He is simply the most evolved guardian I have ever met. He has decided that in this house, there is no threat worthy of his anger. He is a living shield, Susan. He is simply waiting for a moment of true, life-threatening darkness to show you who he really is. Until that day, he will play the clown because he loves you enough to keep the peace." Susan felt a chill crawl down her spine as she looked at Cain, who was currently trying to fit his entire massive body into her lap. The vet laughed and added, "It's a good thing his name is Cain. His name is the only thing that will ever truly scare anyone, because his heart is made of pure gold." They left the clinic with a new understanding of the titan they shared their lives with. Cain wasn't just a pet, he was a biological miracle, a survivor who had found his purpose in the gentle touch of a woman who saw his soul instead of his scars. Now, Cain continues to live as a 200-pound lapdog, his days filled with wrestling matches and his nights spent guarding the bedroom doors. He is the complete puzzle, the piece that Susan didn't know she needed, a reminder that the greatest strength is the one that never needs to be proven until the world falls apart. If this story touched your heart and you're still not subscribed, please don't wait any longer. Hit that subscribe button. What would you do in this situation? Tell me in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these incredible stories.